Welcome to the Mindfully Masculine podcast with Charles and Dan, where we take a conscious, holistic, and direct approach to relationships, mental health, and self-improvement. For additional content, visit our website at mindfullymasculine.com. And to interact with us, our guests, and your fellow listeners, join the Mindfully Masculine group on Facebook.
Good morning, Charles. How are you?
Good morning, Dan. How are you? I'm well, thanks.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I'm well after recording. Had ceased to, or my computer ceased to function this morning. So I appreciate your patience with me.
No problem. Luckily, we didn't start yet, so we don't have to piece together part one and part two like we've done in the past.
Exactly.
Until we can get that computer fixed on Wednesday.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. Second go around.
Yes. How's my weekend? That's what
how was your
right?
wow, it's like did you pick up a mind reading class?
Crazy. It was good. Yeah. It was I mostly did nothing. Blew off some commitments. Not commitments to like other people's, like things I paid for that I just didn't feel like doing, so I'm allowed to do that.
Okay.
I didn't go to my swim lesson. I didn't go to my dance lesson. I did go to dinner with you Friday night, and that was amazing. I had a good time. We went to F&D Wood-Fired Italian Kitchen. Is that what it's called? Yes,
it is.
And we got some. We split 4 appetizers, and I enjoyed all of them. We got the mussels, the meatballs, the caprese, and the beef carpaccio. And that was a solid quantity and quality of food. The mussels were my favorite. Those were amazing. They brought them out on a sizzling plate like a bunch of fajitas at Chili's, and I was blown away. They were so tasty.
Nothing better than fajitas at Chili's. I mean, no, the mussels were fantastic. The garlic butter sauce, of course, was great. But even the preparation, a little sea salt on the outside of the mussels, that definitely added to the flavor. They weren't overly chewy, which can happen from time to time. It was it was great.
The number 2 for me was probably the beef carpaccio. I thought that was really well done. I like the all the herbs and the sauce that they put on it. Number 3 were the 2 meatballs we got. Those were really good. And then bringing up the rear was the caprese salad, which the mozzarella was perfect.
The balsamic was delicious.
The tomatoes I'm still getting used to. I did determine I definitely like the red ones better than the orange yellow tomatoes.
Yeah. So
is that a ripeness thing or is that a varietal thing?
Honestly, I think honestly, if you get both varieties where they're properly ripe and they come from a garden directly and they haven't been picked too early, both of them have a really nice flavor.
Okay.
Those were very typical of most store-bought tomatoes, where very little flavor in those, and not far from the dirty water taste experience that you've complained about. Yeah. There's no wonder if you haven't had like a good or like a hothouse grown tomato where it's like a perfect ripeness. I didn't like them. I didn't like them either. It was a waste. It was a waste to exert energy to chew on those things, for sure.
Interesting.
I did not like the tomatoes. Everything else, like you said, I agree. It's good.
I was able to hang with the red ones. I wasn't like not enjoying it while I was eating them. I was like, this is a slog. I wish I didn't have to go through this. I was like, this isn't bad. It's not great, but combined with, again, the cheese and the balsamic and some of the other the croutons and the other flavors, I was like, this isn't as bad as I thought it would be.
Good.
So I look forward to evaluating caprese salads in various places. You know what? I need to try it at this restaurant where Rob used to work, actually, Primo, at the JW Marriott at Grand Lakes. He worked there as a servant and I believe as a sommelier. And I think they grow a lot of their own vegetables on site. So that might be a place for us to try next.
Another option is you might get better luck from cherry tomatoes. I don't know if you've tried those at all, but
I have not liked those.
Yeah, those tend to be a little bit more off, and they tend to be a little bit more ripe, have a little bit more tomato flavor to them.
Okay.
If you don't like the way they squirt in your mouth, you may just want to slice them in half, and then they're a little bit more like a regular tomato at that point. So some people are very sensitive with the texture, and I can get that. It can kind of be nasty if you're, biting down and all of a sudden it explodes in your mouth like that. It's
Yeah, I don't mind that with the berries that I like, strawberries, blueberries, and blackberries, when they have a little bit of that, juice release. That doesn't bother me, but
yeah,
those are also very sweet, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, for sure. Yeah.
So we did that Friday night. Then we went to Starbucks and had a nice little planning session for some of our future product and service offerings, which I really got excited about. I always enjoy those talks and sort of brainstorming with you and coming up with things we can do to move the ball forward with our podcast and with other things that we're looking at. So you and I will do another follow-up on that on Friday, and maybe we'll have something to announce shortly after that.
Yeah, I'm excited. I felt like we got fairly clear on what could be a very cloudy type of topic moving forward.
Yeah.
So I'm excited as well.
Yeah. And then again, so without I didn't do much this weekend. Man, I did want to talk to you about this. I had applied for that lottery to hike Mount Whitney later this summer, and I did not get a pass. And man, my motivation for all things physical has just gone right down the toilet. I'm still taking my walks, and I'm still not, I'm not hammering pints of Ben and Jerry's or anything, but just the motivation to continue any kind of training right now is pretty low. And I'm going back and forth between giving myself permission and telling myself that's okay, you don't have to feel like it right now. I know something will happen, or some goal will reveal itself to me that I'll be excited about, and then I'll get back into it. But right now it's hard for me to get excited about doing anything other than the bare minimum to sort of maintain my shape and my weight. Other than that, it's like I don't feel like doing anything extra.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I mean, maybe set a deadline to say, okay, I'm going to give myself a week or whatever that is to, not think about it, not worry about it. But then after that week, I'm going to look for another challenge, another hike, maybe even a game on Way Better, whatever you feel like doing. But yeah. I mean, but just put an end date so that, it doesn't just kind of languish and then you end up.
Yeah, that becomes my life now.
Buying the Ben and Jerry's and
right. Yeah.
Not doing anything. So, but yeah, give yourself some time to just take that pressure off and do what you want to do.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's what I'll do.
That'd be my unsolicited advice.
No, it was very solicited. Thank you. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. And then yesterday I read your dad's book, and holy cow, that was really an experience. It was very well written. I really appreciate not only the stuff he talks about in it, but the fact that he was, willing to talk about it. And I could also tell that he put some effort into editing it to make it readable. And it certainly was that. On my tablet, it came out to, I want to say 62 or 64 pages. So it's not a long read, but listening to him lay out his relationship with his ex-girlfriend, and then, how it ended was, it was something. I really appreciate your dad writing that book and sharing it with the world.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for that. I mean, on the next interview, which we're looking to do next week with them, we can talk and get into that a little bit as well. And I wish I could take some sort of credit for that, but I can't. So, for my dad's writing. Yeah. So, but it is, thank you. That's kind.
Okay. Yeah. I'm looking forward to talking to him, and Bev's joining us as well. Correct.
Yeah.
His girlfriend.
His current girlfriend. Yep. And they're going to share they both have kind of similar experiences in terms of their life and how they met, and they're willing to share some of that with us. So, I'm definitely excited to get some wisdom imparted on our ears.
Okay, Dan. So how about your weekend? I doubt you can compare favorably to the excitement of me going to dinner Friday night, blowing off everything all weekend, and then reading your dad's book, but have at it.
Yeah. No, I can't. So let's just move forward. So yeah, Saturday, a couple of friends had invited me and you as well to something called Wine Wars, and I never had heard of it, but apparently it's nationwide. And so what they do is they come and it's for different charities. So, this one was for a charity to raise money for teachers who provide basic school supplies for kids in need who can't afford like backpacks and markers and things like that. So that was the purpose of this event. And how it works is you form teams ahead of time. One, 2, or 3 people. Each team has to bring 3 bottles of the wine of choice. So for this event, it was Cabernet. So everybody had to pick their own Cabernet and bring 3 bottles of Cabernet. And so when you register a team name, and then what they do is they collect the bottles of wine. They put them in little burlap sacks and put numbers on each one of them. And there's an online app that allows you to vote for your favorite wine and your least favorite wine. And so when you get there, you give them the bottles of wine, and we're online there, and I hand them our 3 Cabernets that we got. And they're like, it's all supposed to be the same bottle of wine that you're supposed to get. And I was like, oh, that's not on the website anymore, but it's all over the website. So immediely from the get-go,
that sounds like my move right there. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, yeah, you do.
So it's like, no, we purposely put it all over the website. And I was like, oh, okay. So immediately write that in there. And then, we lost Wine Wars right then and there. So because we didn't have the proper, the proper registration. So, I heard it from Kurt and Richard and Andy quite a bit for that, because they were right there when it all happened and went down. Sure. So they let me have it. So, but there's some other. So it was a great event. A lot of local food vendors. They had cupcakes, and little charcuterie boards you could buy. And what was interesting was they laid out all of the bottles of wine, and there was nobody pouring them. So they left it up to the guests, the attendees, to pour as much as you wanted in your own glass if you tasted something.
That feels bananas.
And it was, but there was wine left over, believe it or not, at the end of the night. I mean, there were bottles that were not consumed. It was crazy. So everybody had a great time. They had a DJ and they had music. And one of the contests was for the best team name. And our friend Andy from Australia, went with his team name of Qualified Wine Drinkers. Wine
that's
drinkers.
Crazy.
Yeah. No,
it was something. He's from Australia. You don't say. I don't think he's mentioned that.
Indeed, mate. But no, Andy was great, because there was like this long delay beforehand where everybody's standing around. We had registered, and what they needed to do is they needed to then index all of the different bottles of wine and then put them on the burlap bags. And this should have been done early on. But meanwhile, we're standing there for like an hour with empty cups, and like no food, nothing going on. So Kurt and Andy went across the street, got a couple of boxed wines of Barefoot wine from the 7-Eleven, and was pouring out. So we had something to drink. They came back with it, and we had, some, we were drinking a little bit from there. So that was great. And the team name that so the night goes on. At the end of the night, they announce all the winners, and the team name that was announced was actually for the win was my team name. And I was a little bit surprised winning, and won a nice little $500 gift certificate to Total Wine for a wine party of 20 people. And
that's amazing.
I was kind of surprised that we pulled it off. I don't win a lot of things very often. So.
Okay, well, stop burying the lead and tell our listeners what you picked for your team name.
The team name that I went with was Keep My Wife's Wine Out Your Effing Mouth.
Very pop culture-y. I'm impressed.
And I thought it was a little bit long. So I was like, yeah, all right. I didn't expect to win. I figured somebody else would come up with something funnier, probably also along the lines of the whole Will Smith incident as well.
Right.
But we pulled it off, and we ended up winning. So that was great. And then And then at the end of the night, when they took away all the bottles of wine, we were there for another like hour and a half. So Andy went back across the street, bought another bottle of wine, brought it back, and was the man of the hour as he was pouring everybody a little taste of some Chardonnay afterwards. So that was nice.
So psychologically, just to do a little bit of a little identification of who's who on this podcast, what made you feel better, that you won or that Kurt, Andy, and Richard lost?
Ooh. Yeah, probably that I won, actually. I'm never one to blow other people's candles out to make mine burn brighter, right? So I was just pleasantly surprised that I won, and I'm happy to share the party gift with Andy, Kurt, and Richard, and as well as you when we decide to do it.
That sounds good. I would say for the most part, I would agree with you. I would rather be a winner than make somebody else a loser, unless there's even just the tiniest little bit of baggage with the other team or the other people, like they're my close friends, in which case I think I would enjoy them losing a little bit more than I would enjoy winning. Like if it's all strangers and we have no relationship, then I just purely feel good about the win.
Here's the thing. I mean, in all fairness, if they had a really good name, I'd feel a little bit better about beating them.
Yeah,
but they went with qualified wine drinkers. They didn't stand a chance, honestly.
Correct. That's pretty. Yeah,
come on. Now.
I mean, I hate even good puns, and so lazy puns I hate even more. But yeah, I tend to, whenever like one of my friends' teams that they support is getting to some sort of a playoff or a championship or whatever, I just always want to root for the opposite team, just because it gives me some way to poke at them, and I find that fun.
Yeah.
So, well, congratulations on your win.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that I didn't attend. I'm sure it would have been so much more fun if I did.
You were missed.
I'm sure I was. But you know, this dry January sobriety that I've walked all the way into April now.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's April, right?
I know.
Dry January is over.
I know, it's crazy that I've kept it going for this long, and it's just like again, I keep thinking back to Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Drinking, and all the justifications and reasons he gives why a life without alcohol is better than one with it, and I just don't miss it enough to change. At some point I might, but at this point it's just like, yeah, I'm just enjoying not drinking, and I'm enjoying keeping up the momentum of not drinking, to the point where it's like, whenever I think about having a cocktail or having a glass of wine, it's like, is this gonna taste or feel good enough to offset how good it feels to just do something for 3 months plus straight? And so far the answer has been no. It may not always be no, but for now it's no.
That's great. It's impressive, man, especially considering, you used to drink. I mean, never really excessively, but what it tastes like, and you've enjoyed it and stuff. And so, I think there's lots of health benefits to not drinking at all, for sure.
Yeah. And so, if anybody, has the desire to switch up their relationship with alcohol, that Easy Way series by Alan Carr is pretty solid. I would recommend it. And, I just read it because I had a friend who was interested in it, and, I didn't want to, I know Nikki Glazer had used that book to stop drinking, and I believe she used it to stop smoking as well, or the appropriate book. And, before I recommend something to somebody, I generally want to have a pretty good handle on it. So I listened to the audio book, and I was like, man, this is pretty solid. And now when I did Dry January, I was like, oh yeah, some of it came back. I was like, yeah, this feels pretty legitimate, pretty valid. So for right now, I'm not going to go back to alcohol consumption. But, I will continue to be open to whatever comes my way. This is not I wasn't really, as I've said, I'm sure on the podcast, I had a very boring relationship with alcohol. There were no consequences. There were no, on my birthday, there were some consequences because you and I drank too much, and people were giving me drinks because it was my birthday. And that next morning I woke up feeling pretty rough. Other than that happening once every couple years, there was no real incentive other than, hey, let's try this and see what happens. And I'm liking what's happening so far. So I may, I don't, we'll see if I make it all 2022. At this point, I don't see why I wouldn't, but
yeah, that's great, man.
We'll play it by ear. All right, you were ready to get into our last rule and get through this long, enjoyable, profound book?
No, I think we should stretch it out a little bit longer.
Okay, we'll do 2 episodes on Rule 12, even though it's only a few pages long.
Yeah.
All right, so my first complaint is Rule 12 is pet a cat when you encounter one on the street.
My first complaint.
He goes a long time before he talks about cats, and that ticked me off.
Yeah, he even mentions that in one of his videos that the idea here is, he didn't want to isolate necessarily cat people or dog people. He said, he speaks from experience because he has a dog, but he knows people get a little bit, one-sided. But he also makes the great point with that is that sometimes we will tend to favor people in our own group over those in another group. And that goes not just like with cats and dogs, but also when it comes to allocation of resources, when it comes to, and he cited a study in there where basically he, people, and I don't remember the details of it, and maybe you do. Basically, it showed that when people were given resources, that they tended to give it more to the people, and it might even been like showing them pictures of cats and dogs or something like that. Whoever favored dogs more than cats, or vice versa, they ended up, and then they had them give money to different groups of people. They always tended to favor their own groups, and it's just something that we tend to do, that we're social and antisocial at the same time.
I know. Yeah. I found it so interesting that it was, I mean, obviously you would assume like, okay, if you group people based on their ethnicity, what country they're from or their ancestors are from, obviously they're going to sort of bond closer together with people with the same background as them. Mm-hmm. You do it about race, you do it the college you went to. It's like all that stuff is like, yeah, I get it. I understand that happens. But then he said, even if you just put people into groups in this experiment by flipping a coin and saying, okay, you're in that group, you're in that group, or like, remember when you were in school and they were forming teams and you'd be like, okay, everybody say a number, the odds are going to be in this group, the evens are going to be on this team. He's like, no matter what the cause of separating people into groups are, they're still going to have some sort of a bias or a preference for people in their own group, even when it's completely randomized. And I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. Do you have any ideas or thoughts on why that might happen?
Yeah. I mean, nothing that's not in line with what he said in the text of the chapter, which is, basically when you decide to favor your group and your whole group does better, then when you move up in your group, it means more. So if your group is achieving and your group is being successful, then your ability to move up to a little higher status in your own group, it means more than if your group is at the bottom or just kind of randomly being placed. So
right.
the more success your group experiences, then the more your individual success in that group means.
Right. I think he used an analogy as nobody wants to, climb the ladder in a failing company. Well, I don't know if you used that example, but similar, if that group is failing, or if you're in a company that's failing, why would you want to move up, into something that is not doing well? So of course you're going to then want to do things that you can do to bring up the success or ensure the success of that group that you're in. And
right.
It makes logical sense.
Yeah. And it makes sense for you to sort of divide your efforts into, number one, making your group as successful as it can be. And then number two, trying to make yourself as successful as you can within that group. Because number one, the better your group does, then the rising tide raises all
ships.
Yeah. And then also if you're the best ship in your own little fleet, then that's going to be a better life for you as well. So it does make sense to sort of divide your time and your energy into both of those goals, raise the group and raise yourself.
Yeah.
I did like that he gets into suffering and limitations of being, and the idea that life is suffering is pretty much, one of the first things that a religion comes up with is the identification and the justification for why this is true. Life is suffering. So pretty much you choose a Western or an Eastern religion, whatever one is your preference, there's going to be something in there to say, yeah, life is full of suffering and here's how to deal with it. That's pretty much why religion seemed to come about, is to answer that question.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. And it seems to be, pretty much universal, regardless of the religion or philosophy that you're looking at. They all kind of agree life is suffering.
Right. And then, how to make it, how to bear that is kind of the answer that they all try to come up with. Yeah, so he goes into, I mean, a lot of this chapter is biographical about him and his family and some of the challenges that they experience and things that they went through, including, you know, his son and his daughter and his follow-up book to this, 12 more Beyond Order 12 More Rules, talks a lot about what him and his wife went through with her cancer diagnosis. But you know, it's hard to really write about suffering in a way that is completely divorced and separate from your own personal suffering and the suffering of your family, because that's the realest suffering that you're going to experience, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And he also, I really like how he sets out to make a case that the way we appreciate things cannot be separated from the fact that those things are temporary. And that's, you know, whether you're talking about life in general or a relationship or whatever, it's like things end and you cannot separate their beauty from the fact that they're fleeting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, if you've ever heard, I'm not sure if these were monks that do this, but they basically, in one culture, in Asian culture, I think monks put together like these granules of sand to make a picture, and they're like 4 or 5 monks will work on the same picture.
Oh, yeah.
And they basically, you know, it's beautiful, different colors of sand. They make this huge picture. It's all from different grains of sand. And then as soon as it's finished, they destroy it, they blow it away, and it is never like a static image to look at, right? And that's the exact, you know, the exact concept there, that everything is constantly changing and nothing lasts forever, and it's to remind them that that's the way life works.
And I think they integrated that into the story of House of Cards. I'm pretty sure there was
there was a scene with that, right?
Where they did one in the White House. And it's, I mean, you know, one of the things that's sort of hard to think about sometimes, and I've heard both philosophers and comedians talk about this, where, you know, every romantic relationship you ever get into is going to either end in a breakup or one of you is going to die.
Well, I mean, what other choice is there?
Right. And so there can be happy relationships, but one could argue there are no happy endings.
And, I mean,
that's heavy.
It sure is. And I think the point of this chapter, which is, you know, petting a cat when you encounter one on the street, or he says petting a dog if you're a dog person, to basically when you are suffering or you're feeling horrible, you get that little bit of serotonin, that happiness, by petting the animal. And to just value and treasure those moments where you have a little bit of a break from the stress that you're going through, or the pain that you're going through, or the suffering of life, and just to really savor those moments. And I think that's what this chapter is about.
Yeah. And that's it's great advice. And it's certainly advice that you know, I found myself thinking on and living out a lot, you know, in the last year, really since, the summer of 2021 was pretty rough. I had a breakup. I had some deaths of friends and family, you know, a fairly significant car accident. And there was a lot of reasons to just be like, ugh. And so, you know, part of what I did was look for those little things to be grateful for and those little joys to experience. And it helped tremendously. I did want to talk a little bit about Superman, and
that was great. I love that part. I love that part, and it really resonated with me, and it made complete sense as to the evolution of what happened with that cartoon character.
Yeah, I've always been a big Superman fan since I was a little kid, and you know, the Richard Donner movies came out in the late 70s, early 80s, and the character of Superman has a real problem in that it's the writers of the original comics. I mean, it would get more and more exciting, you would think, to make him more and more powerful, and the more wild and crazy powers that he had, the more exciting it would be to see him do those in the comics. But, you know, then it gets to the point of, you know, there's no real danger, nothing nothing bad can really happen to him. There's nothing he can't beat. And then it starts to get kind of boring. Like, okay, so, who is Superman going to easily defeat in this week's episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so at some point they had to sort of dial it back. I think he said in the 80s they had to kind of dial back in the comics what his powers were. And also they did some ramping up of the powers of his villains too, to try to make him a little bit more relatable, because it was just like, okay, what's the point in reading another story? I know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, he talks about how he started out, being able to like leap tall buildings in a single bound and
right.
and run faster than a train, and then ended up with him being able to withstand a nuclear bomb and
right.
and be able to move planets and
right.
and fly, and where it was just like he's completely invincible. And from what he'd said, that the feedback was people stopped paying attention to it because it got boring, because there wasn't anything he couldn't do, and he was invincible. And so basically, where is there a struggle, right? Where is there any, if everything's perfect at that point? I feel like it's not a similar analogy to where if life was perfect all of the time, it would get boring for people. And so this is his way of saying, listen, and then what they started to bring in different forms of weakness for Superman, right? Kryptonite. And then there was different forms of kryptonite too. So it wasn't just green kryptonite that would weaken him. It was, they had like a red one that like made him like a little bit crazy or something like that. Or there was like a red green one. And so interestingly enough, in order for people to get interested in him again, they needed to introduce weaknesses, and the more weaknesses they introduced, the more people were interested in him. And so his point was, you don't need to be perfect. People, like you, not in spite of your weaknesses, but because of them, and because of the issues that you have. And we say that to each other all the time about, when it comes to, for marketing, us as, in social media or, for our podcast, or in general, basically allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and expose who we are, because that's where people are going to connect with. And that's where, hey, I can relate to that kind of thing. Whereas if you come across as I am perfect, people are going to have I can't relate to that because I'm not perfect, And I think that's what I took away from that section in the book.
I was just having a conversation with someone about this recently, about negative self-talk and the way we look at ourselves versus the way we look at other people, and how, everyone that I've loved in my life, I've loved for their strengths and their weaknesses, their flaws included, and the things that made them unique. But for so long, I've held myself to the standard of, I don't get to have any flaws. I don't get to have any weaknesses. It has to be all strengths all the time, or people, won't appreciate, won't love me, where it's just such a blindsided way to be, where it's like, I can recognize what I love and appreciate in other people is part of their flaws. But then, as men, sometimes I think it's a men thing, or it may just be a human thing. I feel like I have to hold myself to this standard of not getting to have any of those flaws or weaknesses, because then people won't love me. And it's weird how I recognize what it is I love about other people, but then I assume that they couldn't possibly be the same way when it comes to their relationships with me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, and it makes sense. And that's why it's important to have other people in your life to kind of remind you and kind of remind you of that perspective. So whether that's a therapist, a trusted, person in your life, a family member, or a coach, all of those things, having those relationships to kind of bring you back on track and remind you of those things is critical. And I mean, if you think about it, the best athletes in the world, they all have coaches. As talented as they are, as perfect or near perfect as they are, when it comes to whatever their occupation is, they all have coaches. It would be weird to hear of a star athlete without a coach, right?
I just coach myself.
What? Right. Like,
that'd be weird.
Right. Isn't that? But then yet, this person who we hold in such high esteem and has proven themselves so great, for some reason we think, well, we don't need a coach,
Right. Yeah.
And isn't that nuts? Isn't that nuts?
It is nuts how we hold ourselves to these weird standards, even though we understand how the world and people and relationships actually work, but then we don't apply that to ourselves because we think we're either too good or too bad for that to apply.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dr. Peterson goes into a fairly long account of his daughter Michaela's health issues with her, I guess it's juvenile rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah, which sounds horrible based on it. Yes. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine going through that.
Yeah, basically as from being a young kid, just her joints were being attacked by her own immune system and just breaking down and having. I don't know if he lays out in this book exactly how many joint replacements she's had, but it's been like a ton, and she went through a lot, and the family went through a lot. And I'm not going to go into all the detail, but just to say it was very hard on her and very hard on the entire family. One takeaway that I got from this section of it that it was actually reminded me of something that you told me when my breakup this summer was very fresh. You said, set aside some time to just ruminate on how bad you feel right now and just feel awful. And then when that time is up, stop doing it and move on to the next thing. And that is what Peterson said. He says, set aside some time to talk and to think about the illness or other crisis and how it should be managed every day. Do not talk or think about it otherwise. And that is pretty good advice. Now, I didn't take it. I like to sprinkle my misery all through my day.
Yeah.
but like we talked about earlier, do as I say, don't do as I do. Sometimes the advice you give is often better than the advice you live. And that I can't argue with the logic of that. It is, when you're going through something, go ahead and give yourself some time to concentrate on it. Not only how to deal with it and how to recover from it, but just concentrate on how bad it feels. And then when that time is up, then it's time to move on and get the rest of your day done.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's kind of what I was saying about when you're talking about being disappointed from not getting, the past Mount Whitney. Is, give yourself some time, but give yourself a deadline and say, okay, here, schedule it in your, in your calendar. All right, this is, at this point, I'm going to stop. I'm going to move on, but I'm going to be okay giving myself that time and space to do to feel what I want to feel and process all that stuff.
Yeah. I would,
it's right. But as you know, it's going to come out. Sorry to interrupt. It's going to come out regardless. Right. So you suppress it down and then it kind of feels like it's like Play-Doh, like between your fingers. It's going to kind of like ooze out between your fingers, throughout time then rather than just put it together here kind of and get it taken care of.
Yes. And, again, it's like all good advice. Sometimes it is, you can recognize it in the moment of, that is good advice. That's what I should do. And then you just don't do it anyway. And that's, part of our human failings is to sometimes not take the good advice that's presented to us.
Well, and that's why it's good to have a coach or a therapist, because then they'll kind of, and where you've got like a regularly scheduled appointment with them, because then they can go, oh, hey, by the way, how's that going? Oh, I kind of put that in the back burner of my brain. I really didn't get to that. And then you've got that accountability, right?
And that's, that's one of the most valuable things I get out of my relationship with Renata and with you, where, when we talk about my behavior, when it comes to pretty much anything, and it's behavior that doesn't line up with a decision that I made at some point in the past, the question of, all right, so who do you trust more? Do you trust yourself today, who's ignoring this advice, or do you trust yourself from a few months ago when you came up with this plan? And that's what Renata says all the time. She's like, I didn't make this list for you. I didn't make this plan for you. You made it for yourself. So do you trust yourself when you made the plan, or do you trust yourself today who doesn't feel like doing it? And in almost all the cases, I have to say, I trust myself, from X months ago or X weeks ago when I made this plan. He had a more solid feeling or solid hold on things than I do today. So I should probably listen to him.
Just the very fact that you recognize that your past self was more, I guess, conscientious or aware at that point. That's a pretty big deal too, because you could be like, past Charles didn't know. It sucks to be him. He didn't know. He didn't know what he was talking about. I'm the smart one, No, and I'm older. I'm older. I should know more.
More experienced.
More experienced.
I am very open to there will be some things that come up to say, okay, well, he he had the best intentions when he came up with this, but I know information now that he didn't know then. So now today's Charles might have a better idea than he did. But so far that has not really been the case. So far, I would say that the guy was a couple months ago who came up with some plans on, I mean, two really big things jump out at me. The list, my 5 and 5 list of the features that I can and cannot tolerate in a romantic partner. I trust that list. It was a good list, and it came about with a lot of effort and a lot of consideration. So I'm sticking with that. And then also the me that came up with the list of, okay, here are the things I need to do every day to be healthy. Mentally and physically, meaning going for walks, meditating, journaling, my weekly therapy with Renata. That guy, that's a solid list. He came up with a good list, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, I like to call that one the when I'm at my best list. I have that, and I wrote that out, and there's 10 things on there. What am I doing on a daily basis when I'm functioning at my best? And one of the things I try to think of is, what kind of state of mind and emotional state was Dan in when he created that list? Was he feeling as anxious or concerned or stressed out or busy as I am now? And chances are, if you're honest with yourself, no, you definitely were not feeling that way when you put those lists together. So in that respect, I feel like, hey, that Dan was a little bit more clear-minded. He took some time to put that list together. So, I really should kind of follow what he said rather than where I am right now.
Ooh, I'm gonna try to not necessarily disagree with, but give you another perspective. A lot of what I came up with on both of those lists, I did come up with at a time where there was a significant amount of pain and anxiety. And I feel like as a result, I was able to dig a little deeper and ask myself some harder questions because of what I was going through. And so I was willing to set some ego aside and set some hubris aside when I made those lists that could tell me, okay, I'm in the middle of it, and I'm willing to completely seek out and acknowledge my limitations and say, I actually, here are the things I need to stay sane and stay healthy. Where if I'm feeling comfortable and I'm feeling good and I'm just, things are just kind of, just humming along with my career, with my romantic relationships, with my friendships, sometimes I'm not willing to dig deep enough to ask myself those hard questions and come up with difficult lists like I did a few months ago.
I can absolutely see that perspective as well. I totally agree with that. Yeah. I can see also same thing when I'm at my best is, hey, yeah, if I was feeling really stressed and really down, it's like, well, what do I really need right now? If I'm in that, if I'm making a list in that state of mind, it's like, what would really do the most good for me right now? So yeah, I can see that as well. I think then I'll reframe that to say, try to not just think of the list itself, but also whatever state of mind you were in, whether that was
right,
more anxious or less anxious, whatever that might be.
Right.
What, who was that person making that list at that time? Yeah.
Right. And holistically, what makes him more or less trustworthy than who you are today?
Yeah. Great questions. Sure.
Yeah, because it kind of goes back to the idea of, every time that I've kind of just dropped out of therapy or let my therapy with Renata, kind of move to the wayside, it's been when I felt like things were going pretty good. And, just like you always hear about, people with mental health issues who require medication, they take the medication, they start feeling better, and they're like, I don't need the medication anymore. And then they stop, and then everything, goes off the rails again.
Yeah. I think I don't know what the solution to that is, but my thought is it's important then to, put some longer term goals out there so that, you can say, all right, look, I'm feeling pretty good, but have I really hit all of these goals that I'm trying to achieve? Or, what is my why? Why am I continuing to do this process? You might be, and I'm guessing here, it might provide enough motivation for you to not give up on what you're currently doing, thinking, oh, I'm done now. I feel pretty good.
Yeah. I think, again, part of it is just, I made that list of, what it takes for me to be at my best when I was feeling at my worst. And just being able, every time I look at the list, I remember how it felt back then and how terrible I was doing. And I think, okay, these are the things that are required to keep me from putting myself into that situation again where I feel awful. So even though I might not feel like today or yesterday, Renata texted me and said that she wasn't going to be available for my normal Wednesday therapy session. And I was like, okay, cool. That's fine. Things are going pretty well right now. I don't have anything, pressing that I can't deal with. And then she texted me a little bit later and said, oh, what about Friday? Can you do Friday? And my initial reaction was like, nah, we can just wait till next Wednesday. It's not a big deal. But then I thought, you know what? I don't know what I don't know about what could happen. And I don't know about what I might feel. So I said, yeah, you know what? I will take Friday. Let's do it. And, therapy is not free. It's not even cheap. It's one of my more expensive, monthly commitments. It's probably number two after paying my rent is my therapy bill.
But that just goes to show that you really appreciate the value that you get out of it, right?
Yes,
that you
absolutely.
are willing to make that type of commitment. That says a lot.
Yeah, and because I know what my life is like when I'm not doing it, and I know the impact that untherapied Charles has on his friends, on his relationships, and just it's right now it's hard for me to see the version of me that doesn't do therapy as being a step forward in any way to the happy, healthy, exciting life that I want. It would be a huge step back if I stopped.
Yeah, I mean, that's good that it's on top of mind. I guess the question is, do you ever feel or get to a situation in your life where it's not as obvious to you that how important it is? And if that's the case, and has it happened in the past where you've stopped or
for
whatever?
Sure, yeah,
and
absolutely.
So then at that point, what triggers you to go back to therapy? Is it an incident that happens that really is an emotional issue, or
yes,
or is it just you come across something? I could maybe a reminder note or something like that, like, oh, I really should be back in therapy.
No, so far has only been personal disasters that has prompted me to get back in therapy, and I think that's just kind of the way it works for most people. But right now, what has me keeping up with therapy is recognizing that things could be better than they are now. Everything's not perfect, and at this point it's a habit, just like going for walks and journaling and meditating. It's become a habit where it's part of who I am. It's part of what I do every day. Therapy I don't do. Obviously every day I do it once a week, but the other things, it's just part of what I do. And so I do it because it's what I do. I wish I could get, some of the more strenuous exercise that I see value in, to that point where it's just part of, going to the gym and lifting heavy things. It's just something I do every day. But that's really, I've had periods in my life where it has been like that, but not to the level that you or Rob have gotten to, where it's just not there for me.
So do you feel like if you were in therapy, would these disastrous things have happened, or would you have dealt with them slightly differently if you hadn't stopped therapy? What would be the difference maker between you being in therapy versus not, while when you had these incidents that made you go back to therapy?
So in the case of romantic relationships falling apart, it's easy to look back in hindsight and say, oh, that wouldn't have happened if only ...
Yeah.
But it is difficult for me to say that if I wasn't in therapy and taking therapy very seriously as I am now, it's hard to imagine those things would have happened, because I bring some of the incidents that contributed to those relationships failing up to Renata in sessions, and I know that she would have, in the moment, in almost real time, told me, okay, look, this is how you should have dealt with this. And then I say, you're right, that's exactly how I should have dealt with it. And so when at the most I'm a week away from some negative experience that I initiated in my romantic relationship, when you're a week away from something like that, it's not as good as going back and saying to your partner, hey, I'm sorry that I handled this way, I wish I would have handled it this way instead. You can go back a week and repair a great deal of that damage. Going back 6 months and trying to retroactively repair that damage is a lot harder. because of the resentment and the hurt that just kind of builds up, and it just gets high. The mountain just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you come at it with a little shovel 6 months later. And how much can you really do to fix it? I don't know.
Yeah. And that reminds me of the coaching you gave me this weekend. And I was lucky enough to have you there to basically do that exact thing for me, where I was upset about something and I, wasn't sure how to approach it. And I felt like I was going to approach it in an unhealthy way. And, after reading you some conversation that happened, you gave me another perspective that I really needed. And that really changed the dynamic of the entire weekend that I had. And it turned out to be so much more positive than it would have been if I were left to my own devices and not had the coaching that you provided for me, to say, hey, listen, this is kind of your fault, and here's why it might be your fault. And that was enough for me to go, you're right. It made me like reread some of the conversation that I had. And I was like, you know what? You're right. And that really settled me down, and things moved forward in a much more positive way than it would have if I were left to my own devices. So yeah, thank you for that. And I'm glad you're sharing your experience that you've had for so many years of therapy and coaching with me. So that made a big difference this weekend.
Yeah, I'm thrilled that I was able to be of some assistance, and but I'm also so frustrated, not with you, but with. It's like, why do we work the way that we can't just do this to ourselves? But like you said about the great athletes, having to have coaches, it's silly for me to howl at the moon saying, but why can't I do this for myself? And maybe I can do it a little bit more than I currently am. But at some point, no, it's your connection with another person and being able to, when you and I have these conversations with each other, essentially what we're doing is seeing ourselves in the other person's eyes. Right.
Yes.
And you can't just set up a mirror and try to accomplish that. You need to connect to another mind and another body and have that experience where you're sharing that information with someone who's not you to really be able to see yourself that way.
I mean, we've all heard two heads are better than one, and, we kind of dismiss it. It doesn't have almost any meaning anymore sometimes, but now it really thinking it in that context. Absolutely. It absolutely is powerful.
And the other way to think about it is, whatever problems I'm going through and whatever limitations I'm experiencing because I'm mishandling a relationship or a situation, it's like my brain is the brain that got me into the problem. So how silly is it for me to assume that only my brain is going to be able to get me out?
Absolutely. And even if it is, you now have to overcome your default, which is what got you into the situation to begin with. You thought you were making the best decisions at the time. And now, in order to get out of it, you have to overcome that. Whereas somebody else doesn't have that. They didn't already set themselves up with that problem. So I like the way you phrased that. That makes total sense.
Yeah. Okay, we're running a little low on time, so I want to finally move to the part of this chapter where he finally gets to cats. Thank goodness, right?
Yeah.
And he says some really great things about cats that I agree with, and I need to read. Cats are only semi-domesticated, which is now I love dogs too, but I have a preference for cats, and I'm definitely on board with that. They're semi-domesticated. They're friendly on their own terms. Dogs have been tamed, but cats have made a decision. I love that. My cat right now is snoozing on my bed, mostly on my pair of jeans that I am absolutely going to have to lint roll before I can leave the house in them because he's making a bed out of them right now.
Nice.
But I like that about I like when the feeling that a cat has chosen to interact with you, where a dog is so loyal that he almost has no other choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I didn't realize cats weren't totally domesticated. That was, I learned a little something there.
Yeah. And then he comes down to the, this part where he talks about, part of him that wants to scare a cat when he sees it. I do not identify with that at all. That seems psychotic to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I don't have that urge either. Yeah. I don't want to provoke. That's the whole thing, is because they are a little bit more unpredictable than dogs, I feel like. And I've had my experience being bitten by cats and scratched. I'm not into the business of provoking them in any way. No.
Oh yeah, I get plenty of scratches and bites even when I'm just being sweet to my cat. So
that's been my experience, and hence is why I'm a dog person. Actually,
look, I get it. And then finally on page 353, he kind of ties it together with why this rule is what it is. He says, and maybe when you're going for a walk and your head is spinning, a cat will show up, and if you pay attention to it, then you will get a reminder for just 15 seconds that the wonder of being might make up for the ineradicable suffering that accompanies it. So that's the experience of being out on a walk and seeing a cat and having its tail go up and that little crook at the top, and it walks over to you, and sometimes it just walks over to you and lays down and shows you its belly. I love that feeling. I really get a lot out of that, and so that's why this is my favorite rule.
Yeah, no, I for sure. There's definitely a wonderful feeling that comes from being able to interact with an animal, domesticated or not, usually.
Yes.
Hopefully not too crazy, but it's, and along those lines, I feel like he reiterates that life is suffering, but that kind of without struggles, then life isn't really worth living. It's really gets boring. Where if everything was perfect, if you were Superman and completely invincible,
right,
there would be, part of our drive as human beings is to achieve, is to fix things, is to get better and move on and, even evolve, in other ways. And, unfortunately, sometimes that comes in the way of suffering and but that there are moments of respite where you can come and pet a cat or an animal.
Exactly.
And just savor those moments.
Yeah. I would say my takeaway, my advice for this week, the action item that I'd encourage everybody to take on is have a pleasant interaction with an animal. Whether that's your own pet or going to the zoo and just looking at animals being animals, or if you can't do any of that, just watch a cute video of something on YouTube and just let yourself feel that for a minute and enjoy it.
I like that. Another idea is go to a farmer's market. A lot of people bring their pets to farmers markets.
True. Yeah.
And they have lots of them here in Florida, and I love doing that. And the reaction of the dogs when you make eye contact with them and you smile.
Yes.
You can tell right away if they're happy to to engage with you or not. For example, and I like that. I have not, all fairness, thought of a takeaway for this chapter, so I'm just going to reinforce yours. Find an animal, or maybe even find something else. Stop and smell the roses. Take a couple minutes out of your day and really savor those moments where you're feeling good and you can make somebody else feel good. Maybe.
Yeah. One thing I'll add quickly is this is something I do, and it seems to really be appreciated by dog owners. Ask them before you touch their dog. Because you don't know exactly what the dog's current situation is. You don't know what the owner's situation is. So whenever I see a dog, and a lot of people walk their dogs around my campground here, I always say, hey, can I give some pets? And they almost always say yes. But in case they have a reason to say no, like the dog, just had a rough appointment at the vet, or it's a little nipper, it likes to get people, just try to remember to always ask. That's a good, I generally don't touch other people's children either, but if I was going to, I would certainly ask permission first. So yeah, just give people the respect to say, hey, can I pat your cute kid on the head, or can I pet your dog?
Is your child friendly?
Yeah. Does your child bite?
I love it.
Okay, so this is our last episode with 12 Rules for Life. We are both thrilled to be done with it, as much as we enjoy it and as much as we got out of it. Typically this would be when we announce what our next book is going to be, but we are not ready to do that yet, so bear with us. We'll let you know when we come up with something. Just like when we finish No More Mr. Nice Guy, the plan is to do some interviews that will be somewhat connected to some of the themes that we've covered over the last X number of weeks. I guess it would be approximately 6, give or take. Mm-hmm. And we're gonna have some of our old favorites back, and we're also gonna interview some new people. So I hope that I love our interview episodes. So we're going to work on getting some fresh ones done for you guys. And once we decide on what our next book is, we will announce it on both a podcast episode and on social media.
I'm excited. A lot of good stuff to come. So, Charles, thanks and congratulations on finishing 12 Rules for Life.
To you as well. We should definitely have a party. I'm going to get us some party hats. So when people ask us, why are you wearing those? We can say, well, let me tell you about this podcast and this book.
Let's discuss it even more. Yeah, exactly. Let's do that. Yeah.
All right, Dan, take care. I'll talk to you later.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much for spending time with us on the Mindfully Masculine podcast. If you liked the episode, or you think it would be useful for someone else, please leave us a review and join the Mindfully Masculine group on Facebook. Remember, fellas, don't act masculine, be masculine.